The internet has a serious shopping problem. We're hyper aware of it. We know it's a hazard to the environment. We know it's ruining society, but we can't stop shopping. Is this new TikTok trend gonna help? Let's talk about it. Before we get into the video, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. If you are new here, hi, my name's Katie. I talk about sustainable fashion topics and industry insights, and I also give advice on sustainable fashion. So if this sounds interesting to you, then hit the subscribe button and let's get into it. Even before underconsumption-core started trending, I was already gonna make this video, except the title was gonna be, Will We Ever Stop Consuming? And I wanted to talk about how consumption feels like it's got even more out of hand than usual, and how we feel even more aware of that fact and still continue to ignore it. It's gotten to the point where every new product or trend feels kind of like satire. I'm thinking specifically of that SNL skit they did recently on ultra fast fashion brands like Shein.
Shimu, fast fashion from China. Buy online now. Dress, $10. Shoes, $5. How so cheap? Don't worry about it.
But even though we're comfortable enough to mock our culture of overconsumption, we're still pushing on with it. And it feels like things have gotten to a breaking point now. Overconsumption has become our new normal in society, to the point where it feels revolutionary to reject it. And that's what we're going to be discussing today. We know that buying all of this stuff isn't healthy. Even the UN has warned us that if we continue on this path of overconsumption, then our children are going to suffer because of it. But we still can't stop. Has social media and capitalism combined rotted our brains to the point where we can't stop ourselves anymore? One person on TikTok linked the rise of overconsumption to celebrity culture, and how now that celebrities feel more attainable to us thanks to social media, we're also normalizing their overconsumptive behaviors and taking it on for ourselves.
Celebrities and this mainstream shopping culture training us to become hyper consumers. If this is what aspirational looks like, then simply owning 3 pairs of shoes is not aspirational.
Speaking of TikTok, that platform has almost been single-handedly responsible for showing us that anything in our lives can be bottled up and turned into a buying moment. And it feels like we've reached the point where this bubble might have finally burst. Enter underconsumption-core, which is TikTok's newest trend that's so meta it's almost painful. On an app that promotes consumption all the time, and literally it's been rewired to do this even better, people have been getting fed up with the constant push for buying that they find on the app.
Overconsumption-core, get rid of me for another day in the life. Starting with my perfectly matched PJs, run to walk. They're available on TikTok Shop. Try on 3 different outfits, and they're all linked to my Amazon storefront.
So in response, they've started creating videos under the underconsumption-core hashtag, showing their minimalist beauty routines or wardrobes or consumptive habits, basically. The underconsumption trend isn't necessarily about spending less. It's about being more conscious with your buying. It's about asking yourself, do I actually need this? It's about using items you already have until you can't anymore. It's a rejection of the throwaway fast fashion model that has become our reality now. At its heart, it's a sustainability trend. As you can imagine, it's been getting a mixed response. People either love it or hate it. On one hand, you have people who are sick of how all the content on TikTok now feels like it's glamorized, romanticized, idealized, and how it pushes you to be picture perfect all the time, down to the perfect set of matching pajamas you can film your get ready video with me in your TikTok approved headband. This almost feels like the way we saw Instagram start to transition a few years ago from being grid perfect and everyone showing their best lives on there, to the posts becoming a little bit more messy, a little bit more everyday life. TikTok is going through that era now after being so flooded with aesthetic content to the point where nothing on there feels real anymore. The pendulum has now swung the other way and people want to be real. They want to show their everyday normal lives where they don't need 5 different lip glosses in their bag. What I'm not sure about is if this trend is legitimate or if it's just another clout chasing trend on this app that's being sold to us and will go away within 5 minutes. Whilst it's been waking some people up to their painful shopping habits, lots and lots of people have been pointing out that this is just normal consumption. And I kind of have to agree with them. Before TikTok, before social media, it wasn't revolutionary to only have 1 or 2 shampoos in your shower at a time. It was only when TikTok and influencers and brand deals and all of that came about that we started normalizing the idea of owning so much, that having multiples of one item was normal. And a lot of that was brands trying to convince us that it was normal so they could sell us more. There has been backlash to the trend with people thinking that it's not actually legitimate and creating their own videos but showing things in the background that directly contradict the text that's on screen. Like holding up one pair of shoes to the camera saying, oh, I only need this pair for summer, but in the background out of focus is 10 more pairs of shoes. Others have been calling out creators for jumping onto this trend when their other content doesn't seem to follow the same message. Other discourse is centered around this being a romanticization of poverty. And I guess this is where the nuance of the trend comes into play. Whilst a lot of the videos have been talking about buying less and buying cheaper stuff because they don't need what's being constantly sold to them, people are making the distinction that unlike poverty, where you have to do this behavior, this is more of a conscious choice. You maybe have the funds to overconsume, but you're choosing not to. And that's what underconsumption is about. There is a very legitimate point though, with people pointing out that this is just normal consumption and that underconsumption itself doesn't feel real. It feels like maybe there's just overconsumption or normal.
This consumption trend exists entirely in opposition to overconsumption and influencer culture. Without it, it would not exist.
One reason I think this has turned into a bigger thing, at least on TikTok, is because our generation is so prone to romanticizing everything. We romanticize and conceptualize everything in our lives in order to turn it into content, since that's what we've grown up thinking is normal. And underconsumption is just the new wave of this. Before this, it was overconsumption that was romanticized. Maybe it's a good thing that underconsumption is now being shown in such a positive light. If we're framing the idea that we don't need to buy so much as aspirational, instead of the usual connotations of depressing or restrictive, then it may be the only way our generation can break free of the consumerism brain rot that so many of us feel.
Because influencers are romanticizing overconsumption, it's just as important to start a movement to romanticize underconsumption, aka just living life normally.
What I want to know is, will this trend stick around? I've already seen content on the platform that is doing a 180 from the trend. Despite underconsumption only being a thing for a couple of weeks, people are now posting the overconsumption hashtag, maybe because they're happy in their consumptive bubble and they feel attacked when people say they don't need so much. One TikTok I found flipped the message back and said that overconsumption is also normal consumption, which is kind of interesting considering in TikTok's day and age, they're not wrong. I kind of get where these people are coming from. I mean, overconsumption has become so normalized now that a new trend that attacks this idea may feel personal. But even though it isn't, having that temporary discomfort within yourself and having to step back and reflect on your actions and ask yourself, do I actually need 5 different shampoo bottles at once? Or do I actually need all of this clothing? Is a healthy exercise and something we should be doing. And that temporary personal discomfort may lead to real change. We've seen trends like this sort of come and go already. I mean, no buying was trending at the beginning of the year, and it got a lot of people interested in the idea of having months or years off where you try to consume as little as possible. And I think it's fair to say that that has had quite a lasting impact. I mean, just the awareness over no buying has grown since that became a trend on the app. So will overconsumption follow that pattern? Will it shoot into the public awareness and then sort of decline, but still be an idea in the background? I wanted to know your guys' thoughts on this trend and whether you thought it would actually impact consumer behavior. And at the time of filming, a lot of you were feeling pretty pessimistic.
To me, de-influencing, minimalism, zero waste, all share a common theme of their limitations of what it takes to create more change in our cultural society. And I really fear that if we don't move beyond the trends to unpack deeper levels of conversations or add more critical analysis and literacy of the ways that we talk about consumerism, I fear that we're going to just stop there.
I feel like the trend is coming from the right place. The idea that people on TikTok, which is arguably the app that is most rooted towards consumerism, are questioning their habits is a good thing. But it also feels like a very online trend for people who live on their phones. I think people who aren't on TikTok would be baffled by this trend and question why it needs to be a thing in the first place. But if this is what's needed to get Gen Z interested in the idea of paring back and living a more sustainable lifestyle, then I can't hate on it. Maybe this is the way that people on TikTok will understand that overconsumption isn't the only option. Maybe this is a really good first step to introducing the idea that overconsumption doesn't have to be your reality. And if it has any impact at all, then I can't be mad at it. One other thing that's so obvious that I initially felt it didn't need to be said, but I'm gonna say it anyway, is that this is such a first world problem. The whole debate around underconsumption and whether it's a trend that's gonna last is very privileged. And I think this is where people criticizing underconsumption-core as rebranded poverty comes from. For a lot of people, it's going to sound completely insane that people need a trend on TikTok to convince them that not spending money on useless items is okay. But I still think that for some people, this trend might be necessary. I still think we need to talk about the debate, and I still think that it could impact a lot more people than we initially think, since fast fashion, fast furniture, cheap stores like Walmart have made overconsumption a lot more accessible. Obviously, there's a scale, people buying 1 or 2 items versus, 10 Stanley cups because they come in different colors is a different scale of issue. But the message is still applicable to a lot of different situations. And although it initially feels like the trend is talking about buying less, it's also addressing TikTok's romanticization of consuming in the first place, which is something we're all perceptible to, whether we have the money to act on it or not. Anyway, I'm so eager to hear your guys' thoughts on this, so please comment below. And I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please like and subscribe if you're still here, and I'll speak to you really soon. Have a lovely week. Bye.